All right, so like I said, I've seen several of you faces, names throughout the day. For those of you who this is your first time seeing me today, my name is Jennifer Hagerman. I'm one of the TAC staff developers for the Lincoln Intermediate Unit, and I will be presenting this information. However, my colleague, Jess Miller, has created the slide deck for us today. So I will do my best in providing you the information that she's prepared for us today. There's my contact information. Again, I'm a staff developer. My areas of expertise are in the areas of inclusion, inclusive practices, least restrictive environments, and then behavior. Okay. And there's Jess's slide. She is our staff developer for autism and literacy. So there's her contact information. And again, I'll do my best to answer questions throughout. If you have anything, you're welcome to drop them in the chat. If I can't answer them, I will definitely pass them on to Jessie and have her touch base with you at some point. She's lucky enough to be on vacation right now. So. All right, we do have our Zoom webinar meeting norms. Again, engagement, you're welcome to put on your video if you'd like. You're welcome to put your picture up if that makes it easier for you to participate. Whatever works for you is okay with me. Again, we want to honor all perspectives. We know everybody's coming from a different viewpoint on things, and we just want to honor those and appreciate those and assume good intentions for everyone here. So, you know, if something is said or shared that you don't quite agree with, please, you know, assume we all come with the end in mind, being that we're providing the best service for our kiddos. Just a reminder here about your Act 48. You'll need to complete the evaluation to get your Act 48 credits, and they're due by July 31st. With those evaluations, not only is that how you also get your book if you're one of the first 100 that registered, but also it's helping us to plan for future. We're looking at hopefully providing some more of these institutes, and we love your feedback to help us plan for the future. So our outcomes for today, we would like you to be able to identify evidence-based strategies that support academic instruction when working with students with autism, learn how to apply those evidence-based strategies in the classroom. And this kind of starts us off. If they can't learn the way we teach the way they learn. So real quick in the chat, if you could let me know, I'm kind of interested here. I was an emotional support teacher. However, in my emotional support classroom, I had several students that were considered on the autism spectrum. So if you could drop in the chat what your experience or role is, if you could let me know if maybe you are an autistic support teacher or an autistic support paraprofessional, or you've just had experience with those kinds of students, that would kind of help me to see who all we have here. A school counselor, so you get them all. School psych, same idea. And I have two screens going, so I'm looking this way because my chat's over here. Okay, and a few, great. Learning support, tier 1, IA. Excellent. Okay, so we have people coming from a lot of different areas. So hopefully some of the information I share here will be helpful and relevant to you. So when we look at why is my student with autism spectrum disorder, ASD as throughout, why are they struggling academically? When we think about our students on the spectrum, many students with ASD have average or above average IQs. So why do they struggle academically? So these could be some reasons why they're struggling. Language development, nonverbal skills, narrow focus, narrow interests, and attention issues. Okay, so instead of seeing characteristics of autism as negative or challenging, consider flipping how you think about things. How can educators play to students with their ASD strengths? So we're going to watch a little clip here about the strengths of students with autism. Hopefully everything goes
so
seamlessly.
When we look at what do learn to decode.
Let me try that again. Maybe when I muted myself, I actually muted everything she said. Let's try this again and see if you can hear the sound.
What do children with autism bring to the table? Well, one, they love visuals.
Okay.
So
Sorry.
The fact that they love visuals make it such fertile ground for us to teach them to read. So immediately I start to make symbols make sense to them by using either real objects, miniature objects, or line drawings or real photographs. So they start seeing that symbolization, and then that makes them excited because those are visual and that's excited to them. Many children, but not all, learn to decode quite early. I've had children who were 3 years old and could read the New York Times, and people go, oh my goodness. Now, did she understand what she read? Oh no. But she had this innate phonological sense that she could read all of those words. Well, people used to say, oh, they have autism, so that doesn't mean anything that they can call words. Of course it does. We spend a huge amount of time using something that's not innate, which is learning how to read, and teaching children phonics and how to read. With many children with autism, we don't have to do that. So we have extra time to spend on those semantic connections that we want to make and really make the social communication part of that. So their memory for facts is absolutely wonderful, using their narrowed and restricted interests to help them explore their strengths and expand it. For instance, I had a child that wanted to be a pilot. It was perfect. You can find math in pilots. You can find geography in pilots. I can find biographies in pilots. It was wonderful. So we just expanded their narrowed or restricted interest in that. So they bring with such fertile ground to want to read and such interest to want to read that it just makes you have so much fun when you're working with reading comprehension.
Okay. So what do I do now? Okay. Thinking of some of those evidence-based strategies. There's 27 evidence-based strategies. Not all will apply to every student. Not all will work in general education classrooms without a lot of supports. These plans need to be individualized for each of our kiddos. And we're going to look at 8 of them together today. Love this quote. Love, love, love this quote. If you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. I mean, I'm sure there are educators on here that have taught a lot longer than I have, and I've never met 2 the same. They are so differing in their abilities, their likes, their interests, their skills that they come with. So it's really, it's not one shoe fits all. Okay, so our first evidence-based strategy in working with students with ASD, we're looking at physical exercise, increasing their desired behaviors, being on task, correct responding, and decrease their inappropriate behaviors. So some examples that I'm going to show you might be some sensory pathways, wall sits, wall push-ups, walks, taking a walk to visit a teacher, taking a walk to visit the gym, things like that. Just that exercise and movement helping them to refocus or stay with it. So here's an example of one of those sensory pathways. You can ask your occupational therapist, physical therapist at your school. They might be willing to help you create some sort of a sensory pathway. They can also be purchased on Amazon if you're looking to kind of do that on your own. Here's just another example in a school. A lot of times using maybe skills that you're working on and incorporating those into the pathway. And then this is kind of a more mature sensory pathway for some older students. Just an example of that. Okay. So we're going to kind of look here. There's a short video clip that we're going to watch on some autism and fitness ideas.
Anthony Angelico feels strong and capable here in his family's basement. He's always right at home with Coach Dave.
Sometimes we do hurdles, ladders, hand-eye coordination, lifting weights.
And feeling at home doesn't always come easily when you're 17, especially when you're also on the autism spectrum.
Sometimes they just have sensory behaviors where things become overwhelming, the lights, the sounds.
A lot of people with autism have a difficult time with communication. So much a part of society is based in communication.
Coach Dave's program works to empower young people with autism through exercise, which research shows can greatly decrease certain negative behaviors associated with autism spectrum disorders.
Shoulders back. Excellent. And just like you and I, we know that if we exercise that morning or later that evening, it releases these endorphins in our bodies. It's the same thing for our kids. So Anthony, he's had stress when he's come home from school or with homework. And then you see him after an hour's workout, it's relieved.
I feel a little bit more confident and I feel a little more happier that way. I've gotten better at my homework, working out, and my job.
I do think he has an improved attitude with exercise, because there are things that have always been a battle.
Dave has also become Anthony's job coach, helping him find work bagging groceries. But to this family, Dave is more than just a coach.
Fun, loving, caring, a really nice guy, if you ask me.
Dave actually is a mentor for Anthony, and Anthony will approach Dave with questions and problems that he will not come to us for, or other people in his life.
Dave recommends a couple of key elements when building an in-home workout.
When you wanted to start an exercise program or maybe teach a child or an adult a new concept and they're diagnosed with autism, what I found is that you need to develop structure. And so that means maybe it's Tuesday. We are going to start by exercising 5 minutes. Visual supports, they need that feedback. Just like you or I may have a to-do list of our day, same thing with these kids.
I feel strongly that he'll grow up and be a productive member of society. I think that he'll continue to work. I think his gains will take longer than maybe some other people, but I think he'll be able to do that.
For more insights from Dave's program, visit livinghealthytv.com.
Okay, so just another example of exercise and how that can support or be a strategy to use. So we'll move on to the next strategy. Were there any questions about exercise to start? All right, so moving on to strategy number 2, this is modeling. And I'm sorry, I'm dropping everything off my desk. And when we look at modeling, we look at, it provides that student that visual model of what's expected. So it might be important if we have language challenges. Just telling them what we're doing might not work. You might need to show them. Okay. So again, language can be challenging for individuals, but visuals are usually very helpful. We can do video modeling. Some of these lessons are available online. There's a variety of topics and skills out there if you search for them. And then obviously you have the face-to-face modeling. And I know starting this school year, we have a mix of things. People are considering being in a hybrid situation or virtual, but that face-to-face modeling can still happen over Zoom or whatever format you're using. Okay. So for the third strategy, we have the naturalistic setting. So this is this involves instructing students in a natural environment with natural reinforcements. Okay, and I'll give you an example of that. All right. So I'm going to give you a short story here to kind of illustrate this example. So Gio is he's reluctant to speak in class. He often points when he wants something. The speech pathologist has been working with him on requesting items. When the teacher sees Gio pointing to scissors, she prompts, "Gio, what would you like?" Gio replies, "Scissors, please." The teacher immediately gives Gio the scissors and praises his effort. So when you think about this, there's two reinforcers for that student. They're receiving the scissors and they're receiving praise. So the praise may be accompanied by a tangible depending on those children's needs, but that child is receiving that reinforcement for that. Okay, here's just another example for you. So Amy is working with an occupational therapist on correct pencil grip and handwriting. Every time the occupational therapist arrives at the classroom door to get Amy, she has an inappropriate behavioral response. So she cries, she lays on the floor. This leads to a disruption of the class, and it's an unproductive session for the OT and for Amy. The OT and the teacher decide that instead of using a pull-out type service, that the OT will come into the classroom twice a week during writing time to work with Amy. Amy now no longer displays that inappropriate behavior when the OT arrives at the door. So when you think about it, I mean, this isn't a perfect world because I know everybody's, schedules throughout the year are fluid, right? We can always change whenever we need. And I hope you heard the sarcasm there. But so the change in routine was causing Amy some stress, right? So staying in the classroom, the teacher is able to keep Amy's stress level lower. And then that in itself provides a calmer, more productive OT session time for Amy. And it also is going to provide that less disruption to the class. So providing that in that natural environment for Amy instead of taking her out of it and putting her somewhere else is beneficial. So then we move on to our strategy number 4, which is prompting. So in prompting, it's just acting or doing something that will remind the student to complete a task or skill. Okay. So prompting could be verbal. I mean, you want to keep it simple. It could just be also a hand signal. If you're going to use a hand signal, you want to make sure it's explicitly taught to them and practiced. You want to make sure that you're clear on what that is going to mean for that student in order to just simply start using it in class. You want to make sure that we're clear on what the expectation is when that hand signal is given. No specific signals need to be used. You could just do something that works for the teacher and the student. I know some of these things you're thinking of, you look at these and you think of sign language, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a formalized signal. Okay. So the other piece to this is if you find something that is successful with the student, share it with the teacher that's coming next or share it with the other people involved. One of the biggest things here we need to remember is collaboration is key. So if you find something that works with the student, please pass it on. All right. What are some are there any other ideas of prompting that you can think of? Times when prompting might be appropriate for you to use a signal instead of someone calling them out or talking in the middle of class. Can anybody think of anything like that? A visual schedule, excellent. Transition times, yes. Without having to specifically walk them through it every time, having a pattern and a signal that gives them the idea that, okay, now we're going to do what we're doing, what we've planned during transition times. Exactly. You might also have, yeah, positive reinforcement, thumbs up, just letting them know without having to say their name and call them out. That's an excellent time. I'm thinking of an example too. I had a student who needed to be reminded to use the restroom at an age where that really wasn't appropriate, but a signal to them, a private signal that we had come up with that was very low key, would be a reminder for them to get up, leave the classroom, go use the restroom, come back. So something that we came up with just privately. Great. All right, moving right along. So strategy number 5, we have that reinforcement. I mean, we all know positive reinforcement. I know if you were in my sessions earlier, we talked about the idea of pointing out what someone's doing right increases the probability like 80% that they will continue to do that correct behavior. So reinforcement, you want it to happen immediately following the response. This is kind of key, okay? Your reinforcement needs to be desirable to the student. So if you have something that has worked in the past, and I always use pencils, or I always use stickers, or I always use stamps, that's what we do. This is what you get. Especially with our students with ASD, they have a lot of special interests. So if it is not something that they want to receive, and you haven't worked that out with them ahead of time, it's not going to be a reinforcement for them. So you want to make sure, here's an example. If you want to reinforce sitting quietly, you're going to want to reinforce that, you know, when you think about that, you want to reinforce it in the beginning. You want to reinforce it over time. So if I have an example of a student sitting on the floor and we want to sit quietly, I'm going to, wow, that's a nice job. You came to the carpet, you sat the way you're supposed to, very quietly. That's excellent. And then you want to continue. I mean, maybe in the beginning, it's every 30 seconds. Hey, great job sitting quietly. I like how you're sitting quietly. And specifically calling out what that behavior is that you're looking for so that they specifically know which behavior to continue doing. Okay. And then our goal here being that eventually we want the student to do that desired behavior without that extra reinforcement. But in the beginning, of course, it needs to be heavily front-end loaded. So our next strategy is redirecting. Just that, you know, in redirecting, you're interrupting an inappropriate behavior and redirecting them to the appropriate behavior that you'd like to see. Okay. So I'm going to share another story with you on this slide. Here's an example. When walking down the hall with his class, Brian would become fixated on counting all of the students in the line walking towards him. This became a problem when Brian would get separated from his class and get confused or upset when he realized his class was missing. He only noticed this after he would finish counting all the students. To combat this, as soon as the teacher noticed Brian beginning to count, she would ask him a distracting or motivating question. Excuse me. For example, Brian, could you hold this toy for me? Or Brian, what color are my shoes today? Or Brian, could you help me do something? After getting Brian's attention, the teacher would then prompt him to keep up with the class. And this strategy worked amazingly well to distract Brian from counting and redirecting his walking. So a lot of times I mean, as a parent, whatever, I would just, you know, my first instinct would be, hey, stop, keep up, let's go, let's go. But in his world of needing to complete that counting sequence, we need to find a way to redirect that thinking in his brain. He's not just going to be able to stop. We need to provide something for him to be able to do in replacement so that his brain is still going, and then pull him with the rest of the class. Any questions? All right. So our next strategy is task analysis. So thinking about a large task and being broken down into small teachable steps, okay? And we'll look at this a little more closely here. So an example might be, you know, an independent work routine. So if we have an expectation that our students get their work, begin working, complete the assignment, ask for help when they need it, those kinds of things. We might need to break down specifically for our students with ASD, where do they go get the materials? What materials do they get? Where are they going to sit when they get them? What do they need to do to begin? What if they need help? Do they know how to ask for that help? All of those steps that we would expect them to come to the table knowing, we need to explicitly teach those to the kids. Another example might be a math in a graphing activity. Some possible steps that we might just assume are natural in progression. We might need to teach them, like where the materials are in the classroom. How do they create tally marks? How do they take tallies into the boxes on the graph? How do they fill in a graph? Some kiddos with ASD will get, sidetracked with the boxes and filling those in. I like the comment here. I like combining this with video modeling. I mean, a lot of that is great. Just breaking down those actual steps. And if you do something like videoing it ahead of time so that they can work through those steps, learn those steps, practice those steps, when you come to the table expecting that, it's a little more fluid for them. Okay. And then our last step here, our last strategy would be visual supports. And this would be any kind of a picture that helps the students with new learning or helps them navigate their environment. So we are going to look at this short clip.
Visual supports, in my estimation, are a constant that should be available to the individual. We know that our individuals are visual learners. And truly, if we want our individuals with autism to understand what we are teaching, they need to be able to see it. And so as much as possible, we need to make sure that we have schedules, that we have home-based cards, that we have break cards, that everything that we expect the individual to do can be accessed in a visual format. And this applies to individuals who read as well as individuals who don't. So our visual supports could include words or they could include pictures. They can also be used in home, school, or community. Many general educators think that providing visual supports in the classroom can be challenging, largely because they haven't been taught how to create visual supports. After that instruction occurs and general ed teachers implement visual supports, what they find is that these supports help everyone in their class. Further, it also helps the teacher, and if there's a paraprofessional, it helps the paraprofessional because it clearly visually communicates what is supposed to happen and helps to keep them on track as well.
Okay. And I think that's really key. We can look at the next slide here, just some examples, but I think in a lot of elementary classrooms, they have the schedule up, but I have noticed, I have a daughter that went through middle school and is now entering high school. And the idea of a picture schedule, I mean, it doesn't have to be pictures like these, but the idea of an actual schedule on the board outside of the classroom they're sitting in reminds the students and just keeps everyone moving through their day. It helps the teacher with, okay, this class is from this time to this time, not just hearing the bell and, oh, we're in the middle of a lesson, it's time to go. It keeps everybody, it's a support that everybody can succeed with. So these are just some examples of visual supports that can be used. I know I've had students in the past that had their own little ring with their own cards specific to them, what they needed. I've been in several buildings that have had pictures posted because students have learned, for example, the trash can. That might be posted near, I was in a school where we were in the bathroom, and part of the bathroom routine was, of course, use the restroom, wash your hands, throw away your paper towels. So we would have pictures on each one of those because there was steps within that routine that they needed to recall, and they needed that picture identifier to kind of spur that thought of, okay, what's the next step? So above, kind of off to the side of the sink, they would see the picture of the trash receptacle because they knew, okay, I'm going to dry my hands. That's what we learned when we saw this picture, was to take a paper towel, dry my hands, and put it in the trash receptacle. So things like that throughout the building. That would support our students in visual. All right. So then we get to the how. So we know what supports are available. We want to know how we're supposed to do this. Okay. So when we think about the nuts and bolts of this idea here, we limit the choices that we have. Use the nonverbal communication, use clear, concise, concrete language. Think very literal when we're using these strategies with our kiddos with ASD. Comprehension strategies. I know in the beginning, that very first video clip, she was talking a lot about comprehension with our kiddos with ASD, but we, you know, strategies here being building that background knowledge. A lot of our kiddos with ASD are coming to the plate with, like we said, a specific interest area and trying to find a way to relate what we're going to do back to that area to get them more in tune with what we're going to be learning. Thinking aloud, dramatic things, if you can incorporate drama or plays into yours or presenting that way would be helpful. Some other strategies, just modeling the strategies. And then we talked too about the idea of video modeling, and that your peers and your teachers could be doing that. So this might be something that you ask the whole class to do some sort of a video clip on a strategy they've learned or information that they've learned, and use those video clips from those peers as some sort of a video modeling for your student with ASD in the future. You might allow them to doodle or draw as part of their retelling statement. So kind of keying into what their specific interest is and pulling them into your instruction based on where they're coming from. Okay. On our nuts and bolts part 3 and our math strategies here specifically, we have definitely using visuals, breaking tasks into parts so that there's that task analysis. Writing it out for them, and then teaching them the plans and routines. So, you know, in math class specifically, I know in my class, we had a specific area that we kept our math materials. So if we were using some manipulatives, there were specific areas they needed to go to. I could announce to the whole class, okay, everybody get up and get your whiteboard. This is something that needed to be explicitly taught if you have a student with ASD. Remember, breaking down that task into those things that you wouldn't normally assume, or you would assume kids would come to the table with. So breaking down all those little tasks and then being able to teach the actual content. Okay, so some types of teaching. We're talking about direct teaching. Yeah, here. We have engineered teaching situations, incidental teaching, and activity-based teaching. So in this idea, you know, we have our direct teaching, engineered teaching situations. That's kind of something that reminds me of, you know, you set it up a little bit ahead of time. I can remember one example where I had a student that I knew was, didn't want to volunteer, didn't want to call out, didn't, you know, want to share information, but I would set up ahead of time where I had actually worked with them on the skill ahead of time. And then when we got into the lesson, he didn't spend the whole time being anxious that I was going to call on him and totally miss what I was teaching. He could follow along because he knew when I was ready to ask the first question, I was asking him that first question and he already had the correct answer for it. So he followed along with everything else that we were doing because I had already engineered how that was going to go for him, and I could reduce that anxiety for him. Our incidental teaching, just when those situations arise, those real life situations, using that. We talked, you know, in this webinar, we talked a little bit about doing it in the environment, the naturalistic environment. So incidental teaching, you know, if you have already taught them the skill of throwing away their paper towel, but now you're in the bathroom and they're not doing it, you can teach it right there in that environment, that incidental teaching right then and there where it needs to happen. And then activity-based teaching, obviously, kind of fits again in with our physical activity, all those kinds of things, just incorporating more movement, more activity, more hands-on into their learning. Okay. Anybody have any questions about the nuts and bolts pieces that she has for us here? Okay. Well, Jessie has been so kind to put some of her resources here on this last slide, places that you can go for additional information if you're interested. And again, if you have any other questions that I'd be happy to try to answer them myself, or I'd be willing to definitely get you in touch with Jessie, since she's kind of our autism guru, to kind of help you with anything specific that you're working on. I'm just checking my chat here. Oh, hi, Tanya. I just noticed you are on my chat. You noted coupling any of these strategies with high probability requests or pre-correction prompting gives us a better chance for the student completing the task. Just add that I love the think aloud for inferencing. Excellent. Excellent. And I really appreciate you sharing some of the things throughout. We do have a new tack. You're right. So we will have a couple specialists that will be able to support you in your ASD journey with your kiddos. Does anyone have any specific questions that I can try to answer for you right now?
I'm very excited to just let everybody know that our new tack, pending board approval next week, hails from the Vista School. So she has, so she has 15 years experience from the Vista School. So we are beyond excited to have her expertise. So, you know, this is definitely an area that we want to continue to grow and support. So please take us up on Jennifer's offer of, if you would like to talk about any of this further or more information, just, you can email Jessie because her information's in the information or in the slide, but, or any of us.
And I'll just go on to our last couple slides. Just a reminder, if you can complete the evaluation for us, like I said, it helps you in getting your Act 48, but it also helps us in planning for the future. There's our link. We have, I believe, one more session yet to go today. Can't believe our 3 days has flown that quickly. Okay. Well, I so appreciate you all joining us. I thank you for your time this afternoon. And I hope that you enjoy your last session of the day after this. Have a great day, everybody.